All right, we are live. Welcome. This is Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into the show. All right, check this out, check this out, check this out. Welcome. As you can see, I am live from Australia for the second week. I'm very happy with that, by the way. Very happy with that. Okay, so yeah, it is 3 p.m. on the west coast of the United States. That's 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. West Coast America. That is GMT -7. It is 8 a.m. in Australia, in New South Wales, where I am at, and I am very happy to be over here. So let me take down this banner that we have up here. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Let me take that down and put up the Corpus Hermeticum, right? Hermes right there on the screen for you. So we are in the middle of the Corpus Hermeticum. We are on week number 7. Week number 7? Yeah, week number 7. So we're pretty close to the end, as you can see, of the Corpus Hermeticum. You can see on your screen right there that we're about an hour left of this video for the Corpus Hermeticum. So nothing crazy going on. I'm not going to get involved in any kind of politics or anything like that. But we did go through last week was the sorry, I'm having allergy problems and a problem with my eyeball. Like I said, share this out, share this out, share this out. Say hello in the chat. Otherwise, I don't know you're here. There's Brooke. Hi, baby. There's my wife talking in the chat. Tagging people. Good. Thank you. Get everybody in here. Welcome. So this is Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill, and we are doing the Corpus Hermeticum. If you're not sure what that is a very, very distinct possibility that this Greek philosopher and prophet of Hermes Trismegistus, that means Hermes thrice great, 3 times great, wrote this Hermeticum, or received it from speaking to God and things like that. And people around the world believe, let me put myself up in full screen and leave that into the thing there. People around the world believe that he was the reincarnation of Thoth, the Atlantean. The only reason that we have the Emerald Tablets of Thoth is, one of the reasons is that there was a statue of Hermes. He was Arcadian. So he was from Arcadia, which is over in the Middle East. The Greeks owned that area next to Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, modern-day Mesopotamia, is and Iraq area. Just to the east of that, there was a land called Arcadia, and then the Arcadians, or the Arcadians, were Greek. Hermes was an Arcadian, and he was teaching mysticism, teaching spirituality to the world. When he died, they built a statue, big tall statue to him at some point in the future. I'm not exactly sure what date, but at some point in the future, they were doing, like in 1940 something here in the modern era, they were doing like ground penetrating radar, or somehow somebody had heard a story that at the feet of the statue of Hermes there was something underneath there, and they discovered that there was. When they dug down there, they discovered the Emerald Tablets of Thoth between the feet of Hermes. So that was kind of crazy for the world. So I will be doing the Emerald Tablets next. I was going to do them first, but I decided to introduce everybody to Hermes and then go backwards to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. So when we get done doing the Corpus Hermeticum, I will go straight into the Emerald Tablets, and we will be doing the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and I will be breaking those down to you, because that's a very definitive and very, very broad in the information. Focused, Hermes focused more on almost a Western Judeo-Christian idea of the one true God, instead of the many gods that the Greeks had. However, there was a lot more of the spiritual mindedness of the East, as well as the West, influencing what Hermes was talking about. One of the reasons why I'm breaking down and interpreting and talking about the Corpus Hermeticum. So Reese, welcome. Namaste, brother. There's a Reese who is north of me about 3 hours from where I am, and we're talking about one of these days running up there to see Reese because I've known Reese since he started following me back in 2017 or before that when I did the Law of One the first time, and now I'm in Reese's country, so I'm going to have to go meet Reese because he and I go all the way back to at least 2017. It might have been 2016. So welcome, brother. Okay, so yeah, once I finish the Corpus Hermeticum, we will move on to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and I haven't really lined up a bunch after that, but I do know that after we do the Emerald Tablets, we will be doing the Scroll of Mary Magdalene. That won't take as long though because it's not super long. Sorry, my phone is ringing here. I didn't realize it was next to the computer. Let me move it so it's not as loud. If it does that again, I didn't mute my phones. I normally do that. Let me mute my phone. Here I have two phones to mute because I have a United States phone and one for Australia. So let me turn the sound off here on this because I didn't do that. Normally I do that before I go live, and I did not do that today. Don't ask me why. I was running around doing stuff, and I didn't end up muting my phone. I apologize for that, especially since it was next to the microphone. I wasn't even thinking about that. And my phone is still on a call page. Here we go. Let's mute everything here. So I think I got everything here. So I apologize for that, guys. My phone was ringing right next to the microphone. Okay, so I will be doing the Scroll of Mary Magdalene, the Book of Mary Magdalene, and then we'll move on from there, and we'll be doing a lot of the. There's quite a few I've been doing. I've had more time, and I haven't been taking care of my mother because my mother passed. So now that I'm not busy taking care of my mother the way I was, it was a full-time job. I'm back to really seriously studying scripture like all day long. And you can ask Brooke, she'll tell you I'm a cuckoo over that. Okay, so let me pull myself out of full screen here, and we'll go into full screen over here, and we will just go ahead and do a sound check. Let me pull this up on the screen. We'll do a sound check and get into the Corpus Hermeticum. This is where we left off at the 3 hour 45-minute mark. So we are on I think it's chapter 9 of the Corpus Hermeticum. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it, and we'll do a sound check. Somebody let me know if we can hear it okay. And we'll just continue here and see how far we get today this week.
Hule, or matter, however, receives them all. Spirit stirs and concentrates them all, and God governs them, apportioning to all things in the world as much as each one needs. He fills them all with spirit, breathing it into each thing according to the quality of its nature.
Got that brilliant pie?
Yeah, a commercial.
This hollow of the world, round like a sphere, cannot itself, because of its quality or shape, be wholly visible. Choose any place high on the sphere from which to look down, and you cannot see bottom from there. Because of this, many believe that it has the same quality as place. They believe it is visible after a fashion, but only through shapes of the forms whose images seem to be imprinted when one shows a picture of it. In itself, however, the real thing remains always invisible. Hence, the bottom, if it is a part or a place in the sphere, is called Hades in Greek, because in Greek, to see is eidein, and there is no seeing the bottom of a sphere. And the forms are called ideas because they are visible forms. The regions called Hades in Greek because they are deprived of visibility are called infernal in Latin because they are at the bottom of the sphere. Such then are the original things.
But see, now that was a mistranslation. Let me explain that, because if you listen to the translation of what Hades is, because Hades meant veiled. You heard that just then when he said that. So they said because it was hot that they translated it into Latin as infernal, which then got translated into modern English as hell. Okay, so that's a mistranslation. It meant veiled. It meant not being able to see because it was smoky, foggy. So it meant the veiling. That was see, these are the things that we lose in translation because the Greeks weren't talking about a place where you were burning and on fire, or where there was a man with a tail, red guy with a tail and a pitchfork and a pointy tail and a mustache that he twists around and a little goatee with horns on his head, running around poking you with this hot poker. That's not what that meant. It was the veiling. The veiling. There's so much of that where they translate that wrong, like when they're talking about, and it was also at the bottom. So the underworld, people think underworld means a place of the devil because of the Latin infernal and the way that they've been teaching this. This has been the mistranslations that they've been using on purpose to get you, because they borrowed the idea of hell from the Asians, because they had the 33 levels to existence, and there was like layers of hell that you would go into. And even that was translated wrong from the meaning of what the Asians were talking about. They were also talking about this darkness, this veiling. When they were talking about the underworld, everybody thinks that means something under the earth, and that it's a cave and it's the hell and a place where there's fire and brimstone. And the underworld meant the internalization. So the veiling and the being here on earth, you're veiled. So when you listen to Thoth, when we get into that later on, when we finish this and we go into that, you'll hear them talking about the darkness, and the darkness being the veil. Well, we'll get into that, and I'll show you that when we're there and they're talking about it. Okay. So when they talk about the underworld in Egyptian lore and most of the religions, the spiritual practices from 2,000 to 5,000 years ago, the underworld meant internalization. However, in the defense of wrongful translation, or lost in translation, everything that is spiritual, as above, so below, as within, so without, or as without, so within. So everything that is manifest in the heavens or in the spirit world also manifests in the physical. So if you look at that from that perspective and don't realize that this physical plane is playing out those dual aspects of spiritual and physical, so you have what's going on internalizing in the collective consciousness of the human race and each individual, and that's playing out in front of our eyes in a physical way. When you don't realize that part of what's going on with spirituality, and you're self-serving, then you're just living in the flesh. Then you're living in 3D, and you won't notice anything spiritual. So you would then be looking for purgatory. You would be looking for this place that would be hell. So when they said the underworld, everyone meant, well, that must be the world underneath this one. The inner world is what it actually meant. The inner world, internalization, not the underworld. But that was the word that they used when they translated it. Just like Hades, meaning hazy, foggy, meaning blurry, meaning not being able to see clear, meaning that the veil. But they translated that into Latin by, well, it was hot there, so it must be infernal. Then the infernal in Latin got translated into fire and brimstone and hell in English. So they used the word hell because that was a translation from an Asian word that meant the same thing as the veiling, but it was hot and uncomfortable, because when you're living in this place where you're further away from the light, it's in the darkness, veiled in the darkness where you can't see, and you can't see the light because you're away from the light. So if you're farther away from the light, which is the heat, the light bringer, the sun, how is it that it wouldn't be cold? How is it that it's hotter and that you're on fire? There is no translation for that. So it became uncomfortable because it was steamy. So therefore they called it infernal. And then they just said that it was hell and you will burn there. And the burning that you're doing is a spiritual and a psychological burning. It's what's going on with everybody that's here on earth, that we're constantly burning. We're constantly feeling this the strife of life. And so that's burning in hell. So it's an internalization. So they translated that wrong. They do that with everything. And they don't realize that that's a concept. And some people will, when they get into the etymology of words, when you look at that in you're translating from Greek, say let's just to Latin, and then it probably went from Latin to this Castilian to Spanish or Italian in the modern, or it went straight to English. But it would have gone to King James version of English, which would have been Middle English, and then to modern English. So you have to realize that we're looking at 4 translations away, or 3.5 to 4 possibly, unless they went from, it could have been worse, they could have gone from Greek to Coptic instead of to Latin, and then maybe to Latin and back. So it depends on how many times they do it. It's just like from the Sanskrit, when they translate it to Yiddish, it's not as bad because Yiddish is or Hebrew or Arabic. Those are all versions of Sanskrit. So they're just like Italian and Spanish today are versions of Latin, Romanized Latin. So depending on how many times they've translated it, and then whether or not they're taking advantage or not, or mistranslating something, because words are concepts. Even in English, words are concepts. Like the word run has, hundreds of definitions for that word, depending on what sentence you put it in. However, just right here, when you're hearing what they're saying about the Greek word Hades, having to do with, at first he says the veiling, basically, the foggy, not being able to see, but then they centered on why is it foggy? Well, it's foggy because it's steamy. So if it's steamy, then it's, instead of fog, instead of mist, it's steamy. Therefore, it must be hot. Therefore, Hades. Therefore, that's where they got the infernal translation from Hades as infernal in the Latin, and then into hell in English. But it's an internalization. It is the veiling. The underworld was always, if you look at Egyptian, if you look at people even at the time, or cultures that are further back, the underworld was the internalization. It was the darkness. The darkness was internalized, positive and negative, or the other way around, negative and positive. The negative being, and the physical being away from the light, being veiled. And that was what they were teaching. They were teaching it that way back then, but to corrupt it into the way that it is now of all the religions, it had to have changed. And they changed that stuff during Constantine's time for the most part. But there was many different councils, but the first and second council of Nicaea with Constantine was where they really reorganized everything. So so that's a mistranslation. Let me go back over here in full screen here, and let's continue. So again, here is where we're looking at the internalization. We're looking at the veiling, not hell, not hellfire. All right, let's continue. But it's just a mistranslation. So here we go.
Primeval things, the sources or beginnings of all, as it were, for all are in them, or through them, or from them. All these of which you speak, Trismegistus, what are they? The whole substance of all the forms in the world, and of each one of them in its normal state, is, if I may say so, material. Matter nourishes bodies, spirit nourishes souls. But consciousness, the heavenly gift that is happiness for humanity alone, not all humans, but only the few who have the mind to contain so great a bounty, as the sun lights up the world, so the human mind shines with the light of consciousness. But it is greater, for whatever the sun illuminates is sometimes deprived of its light by the interposition of earth and moon and the intervening night. Consciousness, once coupled with the human soul, becomes one material in the closely joined coupling, so that minds of this sort are never obstructed by the errors of darkness. They are right who have said that the soul of the gods is consciousness, though I say it is the soul not of all gods, but only of the great and original gods.
This guy is claiming that not only has he met an extraterrestrial, but he channels one.
Was just like.
Which gods do you call the sources of things, or the first beginnings, Trismegistus?
See, now here you see that Hermes is talking about the multiple gods. So weirdly, at different places in even this Corpus Hermeticum, you see that Hermes is talking about the only God, the one God, the true God, then the multi-God. So that there's a lot of what's going on even in the Corpus Hermeticum, to where you see and we're just really focusing on this portion of the Hermetic text. This is just the Corpus Hermeticum. because there's a lot more in that. The Kabbalion, depending on how you say that. There's a lot more in that, but we're not going to focus on that right away. Like I said, we're going to focus on the Corpus Hermeticum, and then we're going to move into the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, because of people believing that Hermes was literally the Thoth, the Atlantean. And it seems that it's very possible that Hermes was a reincarnation of Thoth. I'm not quite sure 100% though. Yeah, so we'll see what they how whether people will bear that out more. There's a lot of other people in history that we believe are the same soul that's reincarnated, but a lot of people don't like us to talk about that, because there's some people that live in the flesh and they don't even believe in a creator of the universe, so they don't believe in reincarnation either. They don't want anybody thinking about reincarnation, because they want you to believe that this one life that you have right now is the only life that you have, right? So, yeah. So, right. Okay. Then Reese said, I can't like comments. I'm not sure what's going on with that. The Facebook changed a few things, and I haven't gone in and changed the settings, Reese. I apologize if you can't hit like on the comments. It might be a default that happened when Facebook did an update. I'll have to look into that. There's a lot of things that have changed that are kind of annoying, including, if I'm going live like I am from StreamYard onto Facebook. You were the first person to point out that some of my shows were missing, and then I went back and Facebook decided to delete everybody's shows they claimed, but they only deleted certain shows of mine and left other shows of mine. Maybe I went live on the channel on that particular day, and that was it. I don't think I did though. But so there's a lot of things that have changed in Facebook. But there was, if you're on your phone, Reese, there was a Facebook update on my phone. I did a Facebook update like yesterday on my American phone, and like I think the day before on my Australian phone. So if you're on your phone, it's possible that you didn't do the update, but it could be that it's something that's going on. If anybody else has that problem too, right? Chandra says, yeah, I was wondering if they actually deleted everything that they said they would. I haven't looked yet though. So yeah, they said, Chandra, they said that they had messaged me. I think I was in America at the time. I was still in the United States. And it was back in May, because I was reading it when Brooke was there with me. So then all of a sudden they did that, and Reese was the one who said, look, all your says this stuff's not available. So I went, they do that sometimes, and I went and looked, and my archives have been deleted, but they've left so much of the stuff that I did that was not controversial. So I think they did that to get around their own standards of because they're kissing the ring of Donald Trump and not going after people the way that they were under the Joe Biden, where they would go after people for saying things out of what they don't like. So they couldn't delete it. So I think they got around it by then saying, well, we're going to go back and delete all the stuff that was too much memory that's being held up on our websites. And then they handpicked what they wanted to delete, because if you go back in my archives and look, you see that there was all kinds of other stuff that I did where I went live from StreamYard, which they were saying that if you went live not on Facebook, we were going to delete that. And going forward, we're going to delete that. Yet they left up stuff that I wasn't talking anything controversial about spirituality or governments. They left all those up, but they deleted all the ones that have anything to do with spirituality and anytime I mention the deep state. So go with that how you want, but it looks like it's shadow banning in a very large way, because I had the same thing happen on Google, but Google was just straightforward. We don't like you, and we're deplatforming you. They at least were upfront and told me that we hate you. You're a menace to what we have as our standards, because you're actually trying to point out that we're, that what's really happening on the planet, and we're in control and you're not. So they deleted me. So yeah. So Brooke said it's okay on my laptop but not on my mobile. Yeah. So then it must be. Brooke, it must be the update, because I literally just did an update on both of my phones in the last 2 days for the Facebook app. So then it must be that, because if it's fine on the laptop but not on the mobile, then the mobile phone has an update that you have to do for some reason. Okay, so Chandra, she said interesting. So oppositions are picking at straws, right? Brooks says opposition are picking at straws now, as they know that they have limited time left. It shows me that they don't have much more left in the bag. Right? No, exactly. Right. So they're literally grasping at straws for control these days, because they realize that their time is short. That comes right out of the Bible, right? Iron Maiden put that in one of their songs. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, right? For the devil sent his beast with wrath, because he knows his time is short. That's right out of the Bible. Iron Maiden quoted that back in 1982 in one of their songs. It was the intro to one of their songs, was that verse from the Bible. So literally, the devil sends his beast with wrath because he knows his time is short. And then it's when it says, let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number, and its number is 666. But that's a wrongful translation. I've talked about this before. That translation is not accurate. The actual translation is, it is a human number. The actual translation should have been, and was originally, if you go back far enough, even to the King James version of the Bible, but if you go back even further than that, it is the number of man, not a number of man. It is a number. It is not. It doesn't say it is a human number. It is the human number. It is the number of man is the actual wording. Then in the new, in the NIV version, New International Version of the Bible, they've changed that translation to, for it is a human number. That's a wrongful translation all the way across the board, because even if you go back to the King James Version, KGIV, or KJV version of the Bible, you'll see that it didn't say then it was a human number. It said it was, even that one said it was a number of man, but that was the wrongful translation. When you go to there and back, it is the number. It is the number of man, not a number of man, 666, because it is the building blocks of the human existence, the human condition. It is 6 neutrons, 6 protons, and 6 electrons. That is what we're made of. 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, 666. So the number of the beast is flesh. 666 is the number of the beast. It is living in the flesh. It is not a monster. It is not a monster that is running around. It is not the devil that's running around, right? It is the human condition. Aaron, what's up, my brother? There's another person coming in that goes back 150 years with me. Aaron, what's up, brother? Welcome. So Aaron and I used to do a podcast together. That's Aaron Fowler, psychic medium, psychic shaman. You can go to Aaron Fowler, Psychic Shaman 333. I think that's your website, Aaron. Put it up in the chat. He does psychic readings, and he and I had a podcast together that he still has the page up for, and I think he still posts on there. We did a pirate cast together for a while. We had a blast talking about all kinds of deep state stuff, from anything that would piss people off. We talked about on our pirate cast. Okay, so the number of the beast is not a number of the devil. It's 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. So lost in translation once again, and we'll get right back into Hermes. So here we have these translations. This is one of the reasons why I'm helping to translate this stuff and give you guys some information of what's going on, right? Folding laundry. All right, brother. He says not much in folding laundry. Yeah, I just did that yesterday. I did 4 loads of laundry yesterday myself. Okay. So let's get back into the, hey, not a problem, brother. You were shouting me out. I saw that. You were shouting me out all week. And last week when I was live, you were giving shout outs for me. So thank you for doing that. Right. So yeah, love. You guys should check him out. He's got a YouTube channel that he posts stuff there. He goes live all the time, all over the place. He's on TikTok. I think he's on Instagram. He's on Facebook. He's on YouTube. He goes live all the time and does psychic readings. You guys should get a reading from him. He's one of the best psychics that I've ever seen out there giving reads, and I love to watch him give reads to people all the time. I pop in and listen to him, and he's really good at that stuff. No, not on Instagram. Okay, so he's not on Instagram, but he's on YouTube. I know for sure he's on Facebook. I know that for sure. I'm pretty sure you're on TikTok. He's constantly going live and doing stuff. And you should see he's got a bunch of videos. He and his wife have a homestead out in Arizona, and he's filming and documenting all the stuff that they've been doing for a while now. I love watching that stuff that he was doing, because I was living in Arizona for a while, and I did want to do exactly what Aaron and his wife are doing. It's not easy work. Aaron will tell you that. He and his wife will tell you it's hard. It's rough, right? So yeah, there's a Facebook link. I'm pretty sure if my wife has that up on the screen for you to see, then I'm pretty sure that's a link to Aaron on Facebook. So you guys might want to take a look at that. So yeah, there's a link for you right there on the screen, www.facebook.com/share/ and then it is, I think it's a 1C. You guys can see it. Yeah, 1CU, capital CU, E, little e, capital Y, capital W, capital X, little G, little S, capital G /. If you're listening on the MP3 broadcast, you might have to rewind that and listen to what I just said and write that down. But if you're watching this on the MP4 broadcast, you can see it right there on your screen. You might be able to take a screenshot of that or copy and paste it. Okay, so let's continue. Let's get back into, let me pull myself up off of the full screen here and go back in full screen over here, and we will continue with this. So you have to realize that now here they went from talking about the one God in the last chapter to now Hermes is talking about many gods. But again, I just wanted to point out the things that are lost in translation when they were saying Hades meant hell, Hades meant fire, when Hades was a Greek. The Greek translation of that was that it was fire and that it was hell, and that it was actually meant the veiling, it meant fogginess, it meant not being able to see properly, and it was talking about spiritually, not in the physical. Let's continue.
Longing for heaven's favor, I begin by disclosing great things to you and exposing divine mysteries. There are many kinds of gods, of whom one part is intelligible, the other sensible. Gods are not said to be intelligible because they are considered beyond the reach of our faculties. In fact, we are more conscious of these intelligible gods than of those we call visible, as you will be able to see from our discussion if you pay attention. For my discourse is indeed a lofty one, all the more divine for remaining beyond human thought and effort. And unless your ears take in the words I speak and do heedful service, my discourse will fly past you and flow by you, or rather flow back within itself, mixing with the streaming of its source. The heads of all classes are gods, after whom come gods who have a head of ousia. These are the sensible gods, true to both their origins, who produce everything throughout sensible nature, one thing through another, each god illuminating his own work. The ousiarchies of heaven, whatever one means by that word, is Jupiter. For Jupiter supplies life through heaven to all things. Light is the ousiarchis of the sun, for the blessing of light pours down on us through the orb of the sun. The 36, the term is horoscopes. The stars that are always fixed in the same place have as their head or...
See, now just because of what he was saying about the sun and the light coming off of the sun, I just wanted to point this thing out. So here's some like misnomers where people mistranslate things. Most people, let me pull myself up on the screen here. Most people in the world believe that the sun is on fire, right? That when you look up and you see Sol, you see the sun, or what we call the sun, the star Sol, that it's on fire. And that it's some big molten ball of fire in the sky. It's not actually on fire at all. It's actually not on fire at all. And the heat that you feel off of it is a radiation. It's just a radiant heat because there is no oxygen up there. So what's happening is there's a gas that is up there that is transmuting into hydrogen. And so in a sense, if it were happening in our atmosphere where there was oxygen, there would be fire, there would be an explosion. But there is no oxygen in space or around the sun where that's taking place. So as it's transforming or transmuting from one gas into another gas, it's actually becoming hot. But there's no fire, there's no flame. It's just heat that's radiating off of it, and it's not heat in the sense that we think from fire. There's nothing that's being consumed and burning. What's being consumed is one gas transforming into another gas. It's transmuting, and that chemical reaction is creating friction, and that friction is coming off of the sun as radiation. It's a radiant heat because it's not a fire heat. So it's a radiant heat that comes off of that, and it glows because it's transmuting into hydrogen gas that is packed very densely. So it's glowing, and in the transmutation state, which would be fire if it happens here on Earth. If we did exactly what it was doing with oxygen in the atmosphere, there would be an explosion. That would be a thermonuclear or a hydrogen explosion. Okay, so that would be a hydrogen, like a hydrogen bomb that they used in our atmosphere would create fire. Okay, because there's oxygen to consume as it's doing that. But when you're in space, that's not happening. So the glow that's happening is just that transmutation that is becoming light, and the light radiates heat because you can't have light without heat. So then the heat is radiating off of the sun and coming down here. So there's no actual fire there. But people think that it's on fire. It's not. It's just transmuting into hydrogen, and it's just very hot. So it gives off light, and the light has the heat in it. So when the light reaches here, the light wave reaches the Earth, it's hot. So it heats us as it comes down. So there's a lost in translation and a misnomer, and that happens a lot with things, including when they translate something from one language to another. Sometimes they don't know for sure what they're saying or what the person meant, and then they translated it differently, and they said Hades was because it was hot, therefore it must be this place called hell. But it wasn't. It's not supposed to actually be hot. It was veiled. It was not being able to see properly. Okay, let's continue here.
For Usiarches, the one called Pantomorphos, or omniform, who makes various forms within various classes. The so-called 7 spheres have the Usiarchai, or heads, called Fortune and Hymarmony, whereby all things change according to nature's law, and a steadfast stability that stirs in everlasting variation. Air is the instrument or mechanism of all the gods, that through which all things are made. Its Usiarches is the second. To mortals the mortal, and to them their like. Given such conditions, all things from bottom to top reach out to one another and link together in mutual connections. But mortals are attached to immortals, and sensibles to insensibles. And the whole of it complies with that supreme governor, the master, so that really there are not many, but rather one. In fact, all depend from one and flow from it, though they seem separated and are believed to be many.
What boomers did to stay in
In the
shape.
commercial.
You're not supposed to have a grain and a fruit as your breakfast.
Taken together, however, they are one, or rather two, whence all are made and by which they are made. Out of the matter, in other words, of which they are made, and from the will of him whose assent makes them different. Once more, Trismegistus, what does this explanation say? This, Asclepius: God, Father, Master of all, whatever name people use to call him something holier or more reverent, a name that should be sacred among us because of the understanding we have. Given the greatness of this divinity, none of these titles will name him precisely. If a word is this, the sound of spirit striking the air and declaring a person's whole wish or meaning, as his mind happens to grasp it from the senses, a name its whole content defined and circumscribed, composed of a few syllables, providing the necessary exchange between human voice and ears, then the whole of God's name also includes meaning and spirit and air and everything at once that is in them, or through them, or from them. No, I cannot hope to name the Maker of all majesty, the Father and Master of everything, with a single name, even a name composed of many names. He is nameless, or rather he is all named, since he is one and all.
See, now this goes back to the concept of he who has no name, right? The nameless one, he who has no name. So you have to remember the time period that this was in. The time period that this was in was Hermes and as a Greek. So we're looking at right around the time of Moses, not too long after Moses, maybe 800 to 1,000 years after Moses. So back then they referred to the God as I am, right? So it was not a name that they had like when they were saying Yahweh and things like that. Well, the word Yahweh, I think it's the Yahweh actually translates to I am as I am. So when you see the burning bush and Moses saying, who shall I say sent them? He says, I am, tell them I am sent them. So the weird and scary thing about that is that that when they look at our DNA crazily, as within so without, again, here's some of the strange things that our DNA, when they look at our DNA and they break it down, our DNA, when they take the DNA, the numbers of the DNA and translate those numbers that represent the 33 strands in our DNA, or the double helix, but the runs in there before it repeats, which is 33 runs, which is the Jacob's ladder, by the way, which is the same, 33 steps, 33 vertebrae in our spine, by the way. There's that number 33 again. When you look at the numbers of our DNA, when they translate that to numbers, and then they take those numbers and translate those numbers into letters. If you look at the Hebrew alphabet, all letters are also numbers. When you took those numbers and you turn them into letters, it actually spells out I am. So literally, it spells out the I am. It spells out the I am God in flesh. So crazily, you can look that up online. I'm not just making that up. Science didn't make that up. It wasn't a fringe person who made that up. Science figured that out when somebody says, what if we translate our DNA code into numbers and then take those numbers and transmute those into the Hebrew alphabet and find out what those say? And it wasn't even an anagram. It literally spells words. And I am God in flesh. I am God in flesh. I am in flesh. I am God in flesh. So our DNA actually spells out the I am portion, the Alpha and the Omega. I am God in flesh. So that's kind of crazy that when I found that out, I was like, that's got to be made up. So I looked that up and found out it was not made up. That's kind of freaky. You guys should look into that. Okay, let's continue here. So here you see that where they're talking about the he who has no name, the God that has no name, because it comes through as Yahweh. It comes through as I am that I am. And that is confusing for people to, especially back then, because they wanted to name everything. So it was hard to say I am because, I am one. I am as I am. So a lot of people had some issues with trying to figure that out over the years because humans have to name everything. They have to give it a designation. So God is the one thing that they have a hard time. And so even the word God doesn't do justice to what it is that you're talking about as a concept. So that's why people are always arguing about that as a concept of what that means, because it's hard to talk about and it's hard to describe when the word actually translates to I am that I am. And then when our DNA says the same thing, it's kind of freaky for scientists. They don't know what to do with it.
So that one must call all things by his name, or call him by the names of everything. God, the only and the all, completely full of the fertility of both sexes and ever pregnant with his own will, always begets whatever he wishes to procreate.
See, and here is odes to the androgynous non-sex God that is dual, male and female. In those words right there, you heard that. Always pregnant. Now, some people would say, well, that just means that he's always thinking and creating. It has nothing to do with anything else. However, that's exactly what that is. No matter how you look at that, it's exactly what that is. In life, it is literally that. So whether it's in mentally or physically, it's still the transmutation of thought from one thing to another. So or matter from one thing to another. So it's still the same thing. The concept is the same. There again, they're trying to apply things that might not be a physicality thing of pregnant and actually giving birth to something in the physical. Instead of, they're trying to apply it to the physicality instead of to the spiritual or the mental. So again, it depends on how you look at it. Your perspective is going to drive your narrative. Your perspective is going to determine your reality in that sense, that you either will only see things in the physical because that's what you're looking for, because you're living in the flesh and in living in the physical, or you will then see things in the spiritual, or both in the physical and in the spiritual. So it just it's being determined by each one of us. You determine your reality, like Qui-Gon Jinn said in the Star Wars books that became movies. Your focus determines your reality. True story. So your beliefs determine your reality. Your focus determines your reality. What you believe in is what you're going to look for. What you look for is what you're going to see or what you're going to find. So you have to realize that that's what's going on when it comes to that. So you're going to determine the best that you can by, say, if you were reading this book or listening to what I'm saying to you, you're going to draw on your experience and your knowledge as a base for your understanding or understanding of what I'm saying to you. So each individual person is going to gain something different from every word that comes out of anyone's mouth, or anything that you read, or anything that you see, a movie, a video, or listening to a song. Every single person is going to have a different take on it because their perspective is unique. And that's actually designed into this reality. It's encouraged, and it's supposed to be that way. That's what we're here to do. Okay, let's continue here.
His will is all goodness. From his divinity, the same goodness that is in all things came to be naturally, so that all might be as they are and were, so that to all things to come hereafter they might provide the power to come to be of themselves. This is the explanation given to you, Asclepius, why and how all things are made. Do you say that God is of both sexes, Trismegistus? Not only God, Asclepius, but all things ensouled and soulless, for it is impossible for any of the things that are to be infertile. Take away fertility from all the things that now exist, and it will be impossible for them to be forever.
See, so here's your reason right there in that statement, in that paragraph right there, was the reason that this book, that this scroll, that this book, that this knowledge was attempted to be eradicated off the face of the earth. Because right there, that question was asked to define, are you saying that God is both sexes? Not only God, but everything in the universe. They could not have that in the canon. They could not have that in history for people to learn about. That was the narrative that they needed to get rid of. Because if you have an all-seeing, all-knowing God, first of all, having a God is bad enough. But then not having physicality, not having 3D ideology is just, they can't have that. Why can they not have that? Because they don't believe anything is better than themselves, and because they're living in the flesh. People that are self-serving, people that are evil, are living, and that you must think this is all there is. And the only way that they can keep power and control over you, me, and the whole world is that you have to believe that this is all that there is, and therefore the rulers of this place and these places are in charge. And if you believe that there is somebody that is not a physicality, a human being that's in charge, you're not going to be afraid of them, the human being. So therefore, they have to say there is nothing but this place. And they have to convince you of that all the time. And then they can keep their power over you. They only have power over you if you believe and fear them. So they have to have you believe and fear them. So they cannot have you thinking that there is something other than this place. They cannot have you thinking that there is something more omnipotent than they are. They cannot have you believing that there is something other than masculine and feminine. Why? Because masculine is in charge. Feminine has been pushed back on purpose. Feminine has been demoralized. And so the woman was property and still is in a lot of countries around this world, even today. The female is property and is treated as such. They were treated that way for a very, very long time. Sorry, my Wi-Fi latency is dipping down a little bit. I apologize for that. That'll come back up in a second. So I might be buffing right now. Hopefully I'm not, but I can see on the screen that my Wi-Fi has dipped down a little bit. It'll come back up in a second. So that is a part of their control mechanism. So they could not have anything saying that there was masculine and feminine duality because they were getting rid of the feminine. They're getting rid of the love, the softness, the love, the caring, the nurturing side, because a population is easier to control if they're lower in vibration mentally. Lower in vibration mentally means closer to the lizard brain, which means more aggressive, more masculine, more confused and more veiled by being locked into this place, to lock people into this place. And the belief that this place is only that place, that it's the only thing that is alive. They have to lower your vibration into that, closer to that lizard brain, the simple brain in your mind physically. And that diminishes your capacity for spirituality because it keeps you living in this place. So to keep you in this place, they have to demoralize the feminine, which is the softer, loving, caring, nurturing upper three chakras, and keep you in the bottom three chakras. So they have to tell you that the upper three chakras don't exist and keep you away from that as long as possible. And that's what they've done here on this earth to keep people in a place of being able to control them constantly. So they could not have you believing, first of all, in a God, unless it was the origin of the Roman or Greek gods, to where Zeus was in charge, right? Where you have the male-dominated king god who sits on a throne. There's that pyramidal scheme again. There's that maritime law scheme again, where you have the monarchy. You have the one male-dominated person in charge, and everything else is below that, beneath that. Femininity is beneath that. The queen is beneath that. Her job is just to bear children and cook and clean and walk around barefoot. That's their job. So that's what they translated into their societies, and that was a mechanism to control people. And this kind of thinking was heretical thinking. And and people go, I don't see how that would be at this time when this thinking was going on. Socrates had to drink poison and die because he said, I don't think the earth is flat. I think the earth is round. They tried him in a court, convicted him, and killed him. His sentence was death for even coming up with the idea. So what makes you think that saying that God is both male and female would have been accepted in that kind of society at the time, when just saying that the earth was round, not flat, would get you tried in court, convicted in court, and then you would have to drink poison and die, because that's what happened to Socrates. Okay, let's continue here. So that alone, that portion, those words were enough to get this thing banned from any canon, and they were trying to destroy this information off the face of the earth. And that would have been the main reason, but there's many others, and we've covered that as we've been going along. Okay, let's continue.
I say that sensation and growth are also in the nature of things, that the world contains growth within it and preserves all that have come to be. For each sex is full of fecundity, and the linking of the two, or more accurately, their union, is incomprehensible. If you call it Cupid or Venus or both, you will be correct. Grasp this in your mind as truer and plainer than anything else, that God, this master of the whole of nature, devised and granted to all things this mystery of procreation unto eternity, in which arose the greatest affection, pleasure, gaiety, desire, and love divine. One should explain how great is the force and compulsion of this mystery, were it not that each individual already knows from contemplation and inward consciousness. For if you take note of that final moment to which we come after constant rubbing, when each of the two natures pours its issue into the other, and one hungrily snatches love from the other and buries it deeper, finally at that moment from the common coupling, females gain the potency of males, and males are exhausted with the lethargy of females. Therefore the act of this mystery, so sweet and vital, is done in secret, so that the divinity that arises in both natures from the sexual coupling should not be forced to feel the shame that would come from the laughter of the ignorant if it happened in public, or, much worse, if it were open to the sight of irreverent people. The reverent are not many in any case, no more than a few whose number in the world can be counted, whence it happens that evil remains in the many because they lack wisdom and knowledge of all the things that are. Scorn for the vices of the whole world, and a cure for those vices, comes from understanding the divine plan upon which all things have been based. But when ignorance and folly persist, all vices thrive and wound the soul with incurable disorders. Tainted and corrupted by them, the soul grows inflamed as if poisoned, except the souls of those who have the sovereign remedy of learning and understanding.
See, so here you're talking about the difference between being self-serving and being in service to others. So a person who is self-serving is going to be tainted and corrupted by this stuff in the flesh, lowering your vibration and keeping you locked into the flesh. Those who have the knowledge, here again, you see that in a lot of the scriptures, and let him who has the knowledge to see, or the mind to know. Those people who follow the path of enlightenment will not be corrupted by the things of the flesh, by living in the flesh, by the things that tempt people in the flesh. And this is a portion of that text that you're seeing. It's talking about the same things, telling people that if you are in service to others, you will have a knowledge, because you will be living your life a certain way. You will be in service to others, which means you'll be more of the dual aspect moving into your spiritual mind, the soul, the spiritual mind of loving people, caring for people, wisdom, knowledge, non-violence, non-fighting, non-gluttony, all the things that are living of the flesh. In the modern day, you would not be worried about power, money, fame, clicks, likes. You would be more in service to others, not in service to yourself. So you're not going to be all about yourself. You're going to be about helping others, educating others, or at the very most, serving others, loving people. You're going to be in an industry where you're going to be taking care of people, a service industry, something where you're going to be building things for people, or serving people, or helping people in a hospital, or a paramedic, or a police officer, something to where you're trying to give back to society in some way, even if it's just archaeology or whatever. You're not self-serving. You're actually trying to help other people. In that respect, you're going to start seeing the world for what it is when it comes to these things that corrupt people and hold them in this flesh in the lower three chakras. And you're going to see that, and you become immune to it, because you are now starting to think like an adult instead of thinking like a child. Your vibration moves from that lower vibration closer to the lizard brain, and you start expanding your consciousness. And in doing so, you start seeing things differently, because you actually start acting and thinking and seeing things as an adult, not as a child. And therefore, you stop being caught up in those things and chasing your tail, or chasing that proverbial carrot. Do you see? All right, let's go back into full screen here and we'll continue with this. But here's where you see him talking about that. Those who are following that path, their souls are exempt from, that's what happens to you because you become more wise, and with wisdom changes your ideology. Let's continue.
Therefore, since my help is only for the few, it will be worthwhile to follow and finish this treatise, which tells why divinity deigned to impart its understanding and learning to humans alone. Hear me then. God, the Father and Master, made gods first and then humans, taking equal portions from the more corrupt part of matter and from the divine. Thus it happened that the vices of matter remained coupled with bodies, along with other vices caused by the foods and sustenance that we are obliged to share with all living things. Hence it is inevitable that the longings of desire and the other vices of mind sink into human souls.
And commercials.
This game, you're not ready for it.
Even though immortality and unaging vigor were wisdom and learning enough for the gods, who were made of nature's cleanest part and had no need of help from reason and learning, nonetheless, because God's plan was a unity, he established in eternal law an order of necessity framed in law, which stood in place of learning and understanding, lest the gods be detached from them. For among all living things, God recognized mankind by the unique reason and learning through which humans could banish and spurn the vices of bodies, and he made them reach for immortality as their hope and intention. In short, God made mankind good and capable of immortality through his two natures, divine and mortal. And
Okay, so divine being spiritual, and then mortal obviously being mortal, being physical. Okay, so the two natures of the human condition is physical, mortal, and divine, spiritual. Okay, enlightened. So there you see, even 5,000 years ago, I think this is 3,500 years ago, even at that time, the philosophy, the ideology of what's going on here hadn't changed. It's in there. It's in there for you to see and you to read and for you to hear. But they're trying to control it today, and they don't have anything with this knowledge being taught. Yet, all of the religions around the world are based on that. They're based on all of the teachings of all of those people who were teaching those things. That's the reality of what's going on, right? So here, let's go to a commercial for my book. We got to pay the bills, but as you can see in the background, other side, this is the reality about reality. What is the reality about reality, right?
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide online now.
So that's the reality about reality. So the reality is this dual aspect of the human condition is what was being taught throughout all of time in all of what we now call these religions. Before they were religions, when they were a philosophical, spiritual way of practice, which every single one of those people, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Hermes, Thoth, all these people throughout history, in all of these scrolls that were out there, they were not ever trying to teach you a religion. They were trying to teach you a way, the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, the Buddha. Those were all ways of life. And all of those ways that they were teaching was the same way. It was the way of the spiritual practice. It was the way of the dual aspect of the human condition. It was a way of the bottom three chakras being physicality and the upper three chakras being spirituality and the heart chakra being the overlap. That's the Vesica Pisces, the yin and the yang. That's that overlapping part. That's the heart chakra. When you turn it this way, it's the lower three chakras, the upper three chakras, and the heart chakra that overlaps them both. Why? Because love is the creation. If I'm in service to self, I still feel love. I'm in love with myself. If I'm in service to others, I feel love. I feel love for everyone, for everything. Do you see? So that dual aspect of the human condition is the two natures of the human condition, right? Divine and mortal. Divine meaning spiritual, mortal being flesh. Let's continue here.
So God willed the arrangement whereby mankind was ordained to be better than the gods, who were formed only from the immortal nature, and better than all other mortals as well. Consequently, since he is conjoined to them in kinship, mankind honors the gods with reverent and holy mind. The gods also show concern for all things human, and watch over them in faithful affection. But one may say this only of the few people endowed with faithful mind. Of the vice-ridden, say nothing, lest we profane this most holy discourse by considering them. And since this discourse proclaims to us the kinship and association between humans and gods, Asclepius, you must recognize mankind's power and strength. Just as the Master and Father, or God, to use his most august name, is maker of the heavenly gods, so it is mankind who fashions the temple gods, who are content to be near to humans. Not only is mankind glorified, he glorifies as well. He not only advances toward God, he also makes the gods strong. Are you surprised, Asclepius? Surely you do not lack confidence as the many do. I am confused, Trismegistus, but I gladly agree to what you say, and I find mankind most fortunate to have attained such happiness.
Stop buying courses, but first things first. Let me build your store free today, and then give.
Mankind certainly deserves admiration as the greatest of all beings. All plainly admit that the race of gods sprang from the cleanest part of nature, and that their signs are like heads that stand for the whole being. But the figures of gods that humans form have been formed of both natures, from the divine, which is purer and more divine by far, and from the material of which they are built, whose nature falls short of the human. And they represent not only the heads, but all the limbs and the whole body. Always mindful of its nature and origin, humanity persists in imitating divinity, representing its gods in semblance of its own features, just as the Father and Master made his gods eternal to resemble him. Are you talking about statues, Trismegistus? Statues, Asclepius. Yes, see how little trust you have. I mean statues ensouled and conscious, filled with spirit and doing great deeds. Statues that foreknow the future and predict it by lots, by prophecy, by dreams, and by many other means. Statues that make people ill and cure them, bringing them pain and pleasure as each deserves. Do you not know, Asclepius, that Egypt is an image of heaven? Or, to be more precise, that everything governed and moved in heaven came down to Egypt and was transferred there? If truth were told, our land is the temple of the whole world. And yet, since it befits the wise to know all things in advance, of this you must not remain ignorant. A time will come when it will appear that the Egyptians paid respect to divinity with faithful mind and painstaking reverence, to no purpose. All their holy worship will be disappointed and perish without effect, For divinity will return from earth to heaven, and Egypt will be abandoned. The land that was the seat of reverence will be widowed by the powers and left destitute of their presence.
And that did happen. I mean, look at now. So when this was written, we were looking at, thousands of years ago, and Egypt was still a very, very big metropolis. Egypt is huge today. There's, Cairo and the like. I mean, it's a country, but it's not as big and as powerful as it was when the pharaohs ruled there. So this information that was being told even then came to pass. It wasn't something that was, it was prophetic, because that was what the person believed was going to happen, and it actually did. So was that knowledge that you could look at from a 3D perspective and say that, just understanding societal structures and the way things go, that was predictable? Yeah, it's very possible, because there are people that are political scientists today that can tell you how societies are going to change and how they do change, because they have looked at them in the past and things like that. So it may not be something that was prophetic, other than a learned knowledge of people, but who knows? Either way, it was predicted, and it actually came to be.
When foreigners occupy the land and territory, not only will reverence fall into neglect, but even harder, a prohibition under penalty prescribed by law, so-called, will be enacted against reverence, fidelity, and divine worship. Then this most holy land, seat of shrines and temples, will be filled completely with tombs and corpses. O Egypt, Egypt, of your reverent deeds only stories will survive, and they will be incredible to your children. Only words cut in stone will survive to tell your faithful works, and the Scythian or Indian or some such neighbor barbarian will dwell in Egypt. For divinity goes back to heaven, and all the people will die, deserted, as Egypt will be widowed and deserted by God and human. I call to you, most holy river, and I tell your future. A torrent of blood will fill you to the banks, and you will burst over them. Not only will blood pollute your divine waters, it will also make them break out everywhere, and the number of the entombed will be much larger than the living. Whoever survives will be recognized as Egyptian only by his language. In his actions, he will seem a foreigner. Asclepius, why do you weep? Egypt herself will be persuaded to deeds much wickeder than these, and she will be steeped in evils far worse. A land once holy, most loving of divinity, by reason of her reverence the only land on earth where the gods settled. She who taught holiness and fidelity will be an example of utter unbelief. In their weariness, the people of that time will find the world nothing to wonder at or to worship. This all, a good thing that never had, nor has, nor will have its better, will be endangered. People will find it oppressive and scorn it. They will not cherish this entire world, a work of God beyond compare, a glorious construction, a bounty composed of images in multiform variety.
See, now there, you think about that. Look at what's going on there. Look at what's being foretold there in this text from, about 3,500 years ago. Think about that. So was that again just a person who was predicting the way the world was going to be just because of looking at the world and seeing how things were? You can see that the way you want to see it. You can look at it from a physical standpoint, or you can look at it from a spiritual standpoint. Depending on where you are in your development, will determine whether or not you're going to see what's being said 3,500 years ago. I don't know the exact amount of time ago that Hermes was, but it was Arcadia, so that would have been around the time of the Mesopotamians. So that could have been as far back as 12,000 years ago, but I doubt it, because they're because it was Hermes talking, so it was after Moses, and Moses was about 5,000 years ago, so it was somewhere sooner than that ago, so somewhere between 3,500 to 4,000 years ago when this was written. However, looking at the future, this person was predicting exactly the weight of the world, as it were, or the feeling. Now, you could have said the same thing was happening at that moment, because if you really look, like some people say, the world is really bad. Oh, it's going to hell in a handbasket, quote unquote. That's really bad. It's getting worse. Truth is, it's not. It's getting better than it was. So when you look at these things, even though they sound very, very true, this specifically Egypt and the like being foretold was something that was being foretold about 3,000 years or 2,500 years before it came to be. So that was a little more prophetic. However, when you look at the world itself at the time compared to now, or compared to, say, if this was 3,500 years ago, look at 2,000 years ago when Jesus was alive, and by that time the Greeks' power had diminished a great back to basically Greece, and now the Romans pretty much ruled everything. The Egyptians before them, and now there was that power changing as the Egyptians' power and control over the Mediterranean was getting tiny, and the Roman power and control over the same area, including going into Europe and things in Africa at the time, was changing. But the world had changed quite a bit from the time when the Greeks were in charge. But that just is a normal cycle. Again, you could see that. However, specifically talking about Egypt the way that they were doing here, it might have been pretty prophetic. And if you look at the way that people are looking at the world today, it's kind of prophetic. So you can read into that in either a physical way. If you look at it as a physicality, you can explain that away by knowledge of and understanding of political science, or you can see that as a very spiritual, depending on where you are in your mindset, prophetic constitution, as it were. Let's continue. Or prediction.
A mechanism for God's will ungrudgingly supporting his work, making a unity of everything that can be honored, praised, and finally loved by those who see it. A multiform accumulation taken as a single thing. They will prefer shadows to light, and they will find death more expedient than life. No one will look up to heaven. The reverent will be thought mad, the irreverent wise. The lunatic will be thought brave, and the scoundrel will be taken for a decent person. Soul and all teachings about soul, that soul began as immortal, or else expects to attain immortality, as I revealed them to you, will be considered not simply laughable, but even illusory. But believe me, whoever dedicates himself to reverence of mind will find himself facing a capital penalty.
See, so, here you see, who could have predicted? Here you see the modern era and what's going on and the way it has been. There is a definitive timeline in our history when things changed from a spiritual minded teachings throughout all of history, from all of these prophets, from all of these learned, educated, illuminated beings on the earth, that all of these religions that we still have are based on. Those people, when they existed in time, were not trying to teach a religion. They were teaching a way of being, right? So that information was readily available. Sorry, my cat's having a wingding in the background. I'm sure you guys can hear it. If you can't, then it's just me, but I can hear him. He's over there screaming at the door trying to get in. If I let him in, he'll just start running around and probably messing with things. The last time he did, he almost knocked the lamp over off the desk. So that's why he's staying out there. So if you hear him crying, that's just him wanting to get in. Because my Brooke has gone to work, so now he's alone in the house and out there, and he knows I'm in here. Okay, so here you see this information that Hermes, at the very least, knew that at some point in the future, this stuff was going to happen on Earth. And this stuff has happened and did happen somewhere not too long after that, somewhere that was already starting back then. And by the time we reached the year before Jesus, which was in the early BC era, BCE era, he was born somewhere between 4 and 7 BCE. So before that, a lot of things had changed already, and they were controlling the narrative and controlling the world. Look at when Constantine come forward in time now to the 1100s, and or before that, even I think it was in the year like 800, when they started changing everything again. So they've been taking control and literally stifling people's knowledge of what's out there to read and to learn from. And now we found some of that stuff because of the Dead Sea Scrolls being found and other scrolls since that time period being found around the world, and people pulling them up and talking about them. I was just learning about the Ethiopian Bibles and the Ethiopian scrolls, and I haven't been able to read them. They're a little bit harder to get a hold of, but they still exist. I think I shared a video in the chat where if I didn't, I should. I shared a bunch of videos yesterday. I'll have to go and look in the chat to see if I did that in the Orion Rising chat and see if I shared that. Because if I not, I will, because it was a good video that's talking about the Ethiopian Bibles and how the Ethiopian people, the Christians there, resisted the European control and censorship that happened of the religion. And when I say European, I don't just mean Europe. I mean including the Italians, the Romans specifically, because they were the ones who did it at the time, when they changed the Bibles and changed all of the narrative throughout the world and religions, where they started editing things. Okay, and that did happen, and I talk about that in my book. Let's do a commercial for my book again, just because I'm talking about it again. I'll do the shorter version of it. No, we'll just do the commercial for my book. Got to pay the bills, right? You see it back here in the background. But I talk about that. That's what literally the information in my book is telling you about what it is that they've done throughout time. And here you see someone predicting that they were going to do exactly that. And it's not just in this religion where they predicted that. It's in the Hebrew religion. It's in the Christian religion. And this was neither, but I think it was a little bit more Hebrew based. The religion of the Greeks, they were very philosophically open, and they would read all of the scriptures from all over the world, and they stayed very non-denominational. However, Hermes was talking about this as well, and you'll see that Thoth, the Atlantean, talked about that, and that goes back to more than 12,000 years ago. No one knows exactly the time period. The Egyptians claim that it might have been as far back as 77,000 years ago, when that was the time of Hermes being alive here. Hermes the Atlantean. So when was Atlantis started, and when did Atlantis fall? No one knows for definitively, because some people still think that Atlantis was never really a place and that it was fabled. Weirdly, even with the kind of proof that's out there with High Brazil being Atlantis, throughout all these different cultures that were saying that same place, that there was something that did exist in a certain place, and that place sank into the water and it doesn't exist anymore. Throughout time, they said none of that was true and it was just all fabled, until they found the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which sank into the ocean, not because they crumbled and fell off the edge, but because the ocean level rose, including the city in which Shiva was supposedly living in over in India. When they said that city doesn't exist, it was fabled. It was just something that they wrote in the Mahabharata and the other Vedics, and it wasn't real until they found it offshore, down under the water, where the sea level had risen on this planet about 500 feet, which goes to the deluge and the flood of Noah, and all these stories from around the world where all these cities sank into the ocean. What if in 40 days the sea level of this planet rose 500 feet? And it's very possible that science is now thinking that that very thing happened. So a lot of the cities that were all the cities that were on the coastlines of all of the landmass would now be underwater by at least 400 feet underwater, and some of them further than that. And now they're starting to look offshore and going down deeper and finding that there's all these cities around the entire world that are underwater now, that if the sea level was less than 100 feet, most of them would be above ground. So they're starting to look at the history in a completely different light when you see things like the deluge, the flood of Noah. Is it possible that something like that actually did really happen? And if that's the case, all these other cities that God supposedly destroyed that sank into the ocean might actually be in the places where they were told, but underwater, 400 or 500 feet underwater, because the sea level, they do know, rose over 500 feet in the last 12,000 years. And we had an ice age that ended 10,000 years ago. Where did all that water go? If the ice age ended, it had to have melted for the ice caps to go back to the poles. So where's all that water that was over the whole landmass, north and south? It would have to be in the oceans. Okay, let's pay the bills here.
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide, online now.
Okay, so you have to realize that in these ancient texts, a lot of people saw the future and wrote it down. Even Nostradamus, Thoth, many other places of revelations in the Bible and in the Christian Bible talked about a time in the future. Even in the Eastern philosophical thought with the Kali Yuga, the time of troubles. Peter, welcome, brother. Welcome. How you doing over there in the UK? What time is it over there for you? It's got to be midnight by now, right? Somewhere near that. Yeah, 12:30. You got to be 12:30 at night for you over in the UK. Welcome, brother, over there in Ireland, my Irish brother. So you see that these people knew about these things and talked about these things, but weirdly, almost kind of eerily, they all talked about this time in the future, this Ragnarok by the Vikings, the Bohemians, the Vikings. The Ragnarok meant the time of troubles. The Kali Yuga means time. The Yuga is a time. Kali means trouble, tribulation. You have the revelation. You have this time of trouble, the end times. All of these things are told, but everybody, when they hear that word end times, they believe that means the world's going to come to an end and we're all going to die. That's not what that means at all. That's another misnomer. It's another mistranslation. It just means time of tribulation, time of trouble. And that is the time that if you read in the Bibles and you hear that the devil shall be unleashed on the earth for a time definitively says there's an end to that. That time comes to an end. A time means that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end for a time period. Okay. So literally at the end of that time, what would happen? Well, if evil were running the earth, if evil were in charge of the earth, they would be fighting like hell, to coin a phrase, to use a vernacular, to not lose their power and control over the population, the masses, and the people. That would create strife. That would create tribulation. That would create a time of troubles, a Kali Yuga, a Ragnarok, a end times, a time of an ending. Not of the world, not of all of us dying, but they get the fear into you by all of us around the world by saying the world's going to come to an end and we're all going to die. And you don't want that to happen, do you? And so therefore you have to fight against that because you're all going to die. We don't all want to, we're going to burn up and we're all going to die. And they get you afraid. So you want to keep the status quo. You want everything to stay the way it is. You would rather have the world be this bad than to have it end. And that's what they're counting on. And that's why they teach that. And that's why they're doing what they're doing, because then they hold you into the status quo. Yeah, I know, Peter. That's why I was saying, when I was saying the UK, and then Peter says, he says, Ireland. It's like It's like an insult to the Irish, man. No, I agree with you, brother. That's why I said Ireland, but you're on UK time. And I didn't say UK time. I said over in the UK, because you're in fact not in the UK, because you are in the free and sovereign nation of Ireland. So yes, not in the north, you're in the south. You're in the free and sovereign nation of Ireland, but you're on UK time, same time zone. But you're right. So for anybody who was listening in the country, the free and sovereign nation of Ireland, I apologize. I am Irish and I used to work for that government. So I that was a misstep and misspoken by me. Don't get offended by me. Those who you know me, you know that I would never do that. But UK time is what I should have said, Peter. That's hilarious. He's like, dude, what are you doing? Okay. So you see that there's in all of these religions, and that's why I brought my book up again, because in all of these religions around the world, you see that people, prophets, very wise people at the time, saw that in the future there was going to be this time of trouble, this time of tribulation, this end time, the end to a time period that was going to happen, that was going to have a lot of strife, and that things were in a spiritual way going to become a time of tribulation. This is what right now Hermes is explaining, that it's not a time of war and killing and murder and the burning and the death of a world. It's a time that spiritual-minded people who are spiritual and that are practicing spirituality, not religion. Religion recruits you. Spirituality waits for you to find it. That are practicing a spiritual way, it's going to be difficult for them to even say it out loud, and that's starting now. It's going to be difficult for them to even say it out loud because they're going to be persecuted. But it's not just starting for the very first time now. That happened a long time ago in the 1500s, the 1200s, the 1100s on this earth. They were going after people who spoke like that. The Salem witch hunts in the United States, the witch's hammer, which was printed in Europe for that caused that. Anyone who was being spiritual, thinking for themselves and not living in the flesh were persecuted, attacked, destroyed. This has been going on for a long period of time. And now the new censorship is the internet. Because before it was controlling the narrative by not allowing people to print things in books, not allowing those books to be distributed, then not being able to print things and run them off in newspaper and distributing leaflets in newspaper. And then we had television and the controlling of radio signals and television, and now we have the internet. So people who are seeing things happening on the internet in the censorship, they think that it's brand new and that this control that's happening is brand new, that these people were doing around the world, and that it's getting more stringent and brand new, and they're controlling the world more than they ever have. It's identical. It's exactly the same. It's just the genre. It went from spoken word, the stifling of that, to leaflets, stifling of that, to books, stifling of that, to radio signals, stifling of that, to television, stifling of that, now to the internet and the stifling of that. It's no different. It's not brand new. It's not more. It's exactly the same. It's just a different venue. It's just a different medium. That's all. So people see that and they go, oh my God, they're attacking us on the internet. And they're totally controlling the world. That's no different than what they've already been totally controlling the world in this definitive timeline that has started, because they're desperate now, and the opposition is desperate now to keep their control of the world, and they're losing control faster because of the internet. They're losing control faster. So they're fighting harder because they're in their death throes, right? So yeah, I know, right? No, it's okay, Peter. It's because you were joking, right? Peter thinks that I was possibly offended by what he had said. No, Peter, I love you, brother. I know that you were kidding about that, but you were right that I shouldn't have said it the way I did because you were in Ireland, right? So he's like, no, you don't need to apologize. I love you, right? No, it's okay, brother. I love you. You know that. And I didn't take offense to what you said. I thought it was funny. However, I wanted to explain that, that part, because you're right. That's like when somebody's Sicilian and you say, are you Italian? They're going to get really mad at you. And I'm not Italian. I'm Sicilian. There's an island that I come from that is, in the mind of a Sicilian, better than the Italians. Right. So, yeah, it's like Mandarin and Cantonese in the Chinese genre. So, the Irish being the more Celtic ideology and the better ideology than the English ideology, although I am living under the king's rule because I am in Australia right now. So I need to be careful what I say. I might get rounded up. All right, so let's go back to what Hermes was talking about here. Now, but again, you see that he's predicting that in the time in the future, there's going to be a time when people who are spiritual are going to have a hard time voicing that opinion to the world. But I just wanted to assure everybody that it's not gotten any worse. It's still the same. However, it did start, really hard. They were already doing it in this time when Hermes was writing this, but really hard in the last 1900 years or the last 1500 years on this earth. They've been really going hard because they are in their death throes. Let's continue here.
They will establish new laws, new justice. Nothing holy, nothing reverent, nor worthy of heaven or heavenly beings will be heard of or believed in the mind. How mournful when the gods withdraw from mankind. Only the baleful angels remain to mingle with humans, seizing the wretches and driving them to every outrageous crime. War, looting, trickery, and all that is contrary to the nature of souls. Then neither will the earth stand firm, nor the sea be sailable. Stars will not cross heaven, nor will the course of the stars stand firm in heaven. Every divine voice will grow mute in enforced silence. The fruits of the earth will rot, the soil will no more be fertile, and the very air will droop in gloomy lethargy. Such will be the old age of the world. Irreverence, disorder, disregard for everything good. When all this comes to pass, Asclepius, then the Master and Father, the God whose power is primary, governor of the first God, will look on this conduct and these willful crimes, and in an act of will, which is God's benevolence, he will take his stand against the vices and the perversion in everything, righting wrongs, washing away malice in a flood, or consuming it in fire, or ending it by spreading pestilential disease everywhere. Then he will restore the world to its beauty of old, so that the world itself will again seem deserving of worship and wonder. And with constant benedictions and proclamations of praise, the people of that time will honor the God who makes and restores so great a work.
So you're seeing that there's going to be the time of trouble, the time of tribulation, the end times, but it doesn't mean that the world is going to die and we're all going to blow up and there's going to be this left behind and it's going to be that everybody's going to be on a bus, that Jesus is going to show up in a Volkswagen van bus, and and then St. Peter is going to be in the passenger seat with a big book, and he's going to say the names of people who can come on, and then they're going to go to heaven, and everybody else is going to be left behind, and the earth is going to be scorched. You don't see that. That's not what's being foretold. So this is a story that was being told that is part of these Bibles that were around that didn't tell that the world is going to come to an end and we're all going to freaking die. It was all these bad things are going to happen because it's going to be the time of tribulation, the time of troubles, that the devil, the evil being in control, are going to be fighting like hell, quote unquote, to keep their control over everything in the population, but that is going to end and that there will be a renewal. Doesn't mean that the world has to blow up. However, like I said, the powers that should not be, quote unquote, the powers that should not be are and have been for a couple of thousand years, at least the last 1,500 years, maybe more, been teaching that the world is going to blow up and die, and that we don't want that to happen because they don't want to lose their power. They want status quo. So they keep trying to sell you on the end times means everyone's going to die. We don't want that to happen. So we all have to make sure that we keep things the way they are because they're trying to keep status quo. So here you see something that they tried to edit out. They didn't want you knowing this information because what does it say here? It doesn't say that everyone dies. It doesn't say that the world comes to an end and we all die. It says the reign of evil comes to an end and God's will and the whatever you want to call that creator of the universe is then back in charge, and that the people that are evil no longer have control. That's what this says. And this is at least 3,500 years old. Okay, so let's continue here.
And this will be the geniture of the world, a reformation of all good things, and a restitution most holy and most reverent of nature itself, reordered in the course of time, but through an act of will, which is and was everlasting and without beginning. For God's will has no beginning. It remains the same, everlasting in its present state. God's nature is deliberation. Will is the supreme goodness. Deliberation is will, Trismegistus? Will comes to be from deliberation, Asclepius, and the very act of willing comes from will. God wills nothing in excess, since he is completely full of all things and wills what he has. He wills all that is good, and he has all that he wills. All things are good that he considers and wills. Such is God, and the world is his image. Good from good. Good, Trismegistus. Good, Asclepius, as I shall teach you. For just as God dispenses and distributes his bounty, consciousness, soul, and life, to all forms and kinds in the world, so the world grants and supplies all that mortals deem good. The succession of seasons, fruits emerging, growing, and ripening, and other such things.
See, so now remember, I think it's important that I stop at this point, because if anybody's just tuning in now, remember, this is not the Hebrew Bible. This is from Hermes Trismegistus, who was an Akkadian, who was alive in the time of Mesopotamia. Okay, the Mesopotamian scrolls, the Enuma Elish, the Mesopotamian scrolls that everybody talks about being quite possibly the oldest scrolls on the face of the earth, and that they thought that the Mesopotamians wrote it. The Mesopotamians, when you check the scholars who have been learning this, the theologians, I am a theologian, I've dedicated my life to this. If you look at the people who are those scholars in that language of the Mesopotamians, in that cuneiform, they have discovered that the Mesopotamians claimed that the Enuma Elish, in the very least, and many other scrolls that they had that were accredited to the Mesopotamians, were not in fact of their advent at all. That the Enuma Elish came from Arcadia. The Arcadians were Greeks. Hermes was alive in that time period. That story that they said came from the Greeks, the Arcadians, the Greeks at the time, said they got that from the Egyptians. The Egyptians, when you go to the Egyptian scholars, they say that information came from a time period that was pre-dynastic. Okay, so that means that in a time, the pre-dynastic time period of Egypt goes back to 77,000 years ago and as far back as 128,000 years ago. So the other scrolls that came out of that exact time were the scrolls that left with Moses during the Exodus. Moses didn't have them himself, but the scholars and the historians who left with Moses did. Some of those scrolls ended up in the hands of Scottish and Irish monks. At some point, they found them and got copies of them and took them back to Scotland and to Ireland. If you look at the Book of Kells in Ireland, they have a large group of scrolls that came out of Egypt with the Exodus that are, according to the Egyptians, from quite possibly 77 to 128,000 years ago scrolls. When you look at the Colburn Bible in Scotland, the first 7 books of that Bible that has 13 chapters, the first 7 books are from those scrolls that came out of Egypt with the Exodus of Moses. And those scrolls tell of 2 or 3 other events of the destructions of the world that predate and go back to at least 77,000 years ago. Why is that important? That's important because what Hermes is talking about is also from a time that was before this time period before Jesus, 1,000 years before Jesus. You have these guys talking about things that happened in times that were 12,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, 77,000 years ago. Why is that important? Because Hermes is the reason that we know about Thoth the Atlantean. Thoth the Atlantean, according to even the Egyptians, existed in a time that was quite possibly ended 77,000 years ago. That Atlantis sank into the ocean further back than we thought, that the deluge that happened at a different time. And then there was another deluge that happened 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, but that there was one prior to that. And there was also a destruction of the earth that was done with fire that had to do with a possible meteor or another celestial event in that respect. And if you look at some of these religions like the Bohemian religion, the Viking religion, they talk of Surtur, the destroyer of worlds. And when you look at that religion and you read what the destroyer of worlds does, it's the same destruction that you hear of in the Colburn Bible. But in the Colburn Bible, the destroyer is a female, not a male figure. And in the Viking pantheon, the god of destruction is a male figure. And then when you go back to India, you see Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, quite possibly being a male-female figure that is dual aspects, because there is a Shiva and a Shiva that is a male and a female in that respect. So when you look around the world at this destruction that is in these different religions, people try to say, well, they're all based on the same scroll, but there's no proof that they all had the same scroll or that they found the same scroll. However, you see these scrolls that they accredit to a different time period that go back to Egypt, and Egypt says, we didn't write these. They came from an older time. So that's the reason that I'm doing Hermes now, because I'm going to move from the Corpus Hermeticum to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth when we finish. I don't know if we'll get done today. If we don't get done today, we'll get done next week with the Corpus Hermeticum. And then the following week after that, I will go and start on the Emerald Tablets. Because even the Egyptians believe that Hermes, the Greek, was Thoth the Atlantean coming back in that body, and that there are multiple bodies prior to that, and that the last time he came in to this earth was as Hermes Trismegistus. Okay, so, or Trismegistus. So we'll see. But here you see, let me go back into full screen over here. Here you see a time when they're talking about a time of trouble and tribulation that came about before you have the Christian end times, and talking about a time when the rule of evil will come to an end, and that the holy creator of the universe in a dual aspect. Now remember, they're saying God here in this when they're talking. You're hearing these words here, and if you just tuned in, you're hearing them saying God this and God that. But in this chapter, in the beginning of the chapter, they were referring to, Hermes was referring to the creator of the universe being an androgynous male-female personages, or what's the word I'm looking for? Non-physical entity that was both masculine and feminine, a dual aspect of the mother-father, not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but the Mother, Father, and Son being that Trinity, where the Mother, Father, and then the Son, okay? Instead of the Father, Son, and that Trinity, it was the Mother, Father, and the Son as the Trinity, and the Mother, Father was one person, one energy, the Mother, Father, not separated. And it's for this reason that you see this in the hands of the Christians and the Pope now, where before it used to be this symbol of the dual aspect, Mother, Father, and then as they separated the sexes more in these pantheons, they pulled the Mother, Father to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and then they did it this way, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is the Trinity, when before it was this way. And then they literally just separated it and went masculine, Trinity from dual aspect Trinity. You can look those up in the hand gestures of what they did as a hand gesture. And then they did the crossing because of the cross, the holy cross of Jesus being on the cross, which is actually an X, not a T, because the cross was not a actual T. That changed somewhere in the 1200s, and they started calling it a T, even though they were calling it a cross. The cross was a crossroads, which was an X. You can look that up in history. Again, lost in translation, where they changed things. And now they have you believing that Jesus was on a T, sitting up in the world, and everybody has a cross that they wear, which is just a symbol, but it's a T instead of an X. He was actually on an X with his arms up out like this, more the Vitruvian man, with his legs out and his feet out, nailed to an X that was sitting in the ground this way. Okay. So when you see that Leonardo da Vinci wrote and drew the Vitruvian man, that was more to the crucifixion of Christ, and the proper crucifixion, the way that people were crucified. You can go back in history and see that in the Roman literature, that they weren't crucified on a T, they were crucified on an X, because the X would stand up and you would just have to keep it from falling forward and backwards. You didn't have to put a hole in the ground and put it up in the air and try to keep it from falling over. But people believe that today, and it's okay, because the knowledge and the message is still the same. But it was, in fact, the cross was an X. That's why, X marks the spot. It used to be cross marks the spot. Crossroads were always shown symbolically as an X, not a T. Okay, so that's just the way that the symbols were. Everything used to be symbols before there were words. Okay, so again, there's some lost in translation that people should be paying attention to. You need to learn these things to figure them out. If you don't learn them, you don't know, and you just assume things. And so now it's morphed from an X that he was crucified onto a cross that he was crucified onto that was more of a T shape, and now everybody is using that. And then you have people, that they say that they tell you in these religions. Now, remember, I'm a Christian minister. I'm a minister of two different, of the Catholic religion and of the standard Christian religion. So it's not like I'm a atheist that is trying to take shots at the religion. I'm not. I literally have been a minister in the Christian religion since 2004, and then in 2016 I got my ministry through the Universal Life Church in Phoenix, Arizona. Prior to that, I was knighted by the Holy Roman Catholic See in 2004. So I have the ministry title there. I just can't be called father because you have to go to their seminary. So I went to the other seminary and got the Christian title. So you have to realize that I'm not throwing rocks at the religion from a standpoint of an atheist. I'm just showing that things have been altered and morphed away from certain ideologies on purpose, so that your narrative changes in your mind without you realizing that the narrative in your mind has changed. And that's part of the grand scheme, to keep things into the perspective of the status quo, which is what they've been doing to keep themselves in power for a very long time, they being the powers that should not be. So here you see an older version. This is prior to the Christ, so it's prior to Christianity by at least 1,000 years, possibly more, telling of the same thing that's going to happen that these other religions were talking about afterwards. Did they borrow from that? Well, where did that come from? This is why I'm bringing this up and spending a lot of time right here for those people who will be following me going forward when I get into the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are thought to be dated to, at the very least, Atlantis, which some people think was 10 to 12,000 years ago, and quite possibly as far back as 77,000 or 128,000 years ago. In between any of that range, you're going to find that what we're talking about right here is something that is also being talked about there. And I brought up the Colburn Bible and the scrolls that came out of Egypt with the Exodus, because the Exodus happened 4,500 years ago. So it was further back than this. So Moses and that time period happened with the Hebrews and the Egyptians at about 4,500 years ago. And this Bible, this story, this mechanism for spirituality that is Hermes Trismegistus happened about 1,000 years later. Could it have been based on the Hebrew Bible? Very possible, but we don't know the answer to that. We do know that this information and time period could have been prior to them as well. If the Hermes thing is true, it could have been further back. So instead of 4,000 years ago, Hermes, if he existed in the time that the Mesopotamian scrolls from the Enuma Elish happened, now we're talking 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. Okay, so prior to even the Hebrew religion happening and Moses even happening. So did Moses borrow from these people? The problem that we have with theology is that everybody's chasing their tail looking for who borrowed what from who and how far back that goes, and they're looking for a scroll, and they forget to talk about and even think about the message that is being told in all these religions that are the same. And that's why I talk about what I talk about, and that's why I translate this stuff, because theologians are paid to look into history, but they're not talking about the message at all. They're just doing comparative religions. And then they're going, well, this religion seems like it's like that religion, and that one was first, so that one seems like it's this one. They spend their entire lives chasing that. And I think that's being done on purpose, the same way archaeology was being steered away from anything that was in any way. In fact, I know that it's being done that way, because they're steering people away from spirituality and steering them to orthodoxy and in the religions, and all of the spiritual portions of the teachings of these people in these religions has been taken away from. The knowledge has been taken away from the general population. And it is only in time when we found things like the Dead Sea Scrolls that this information started coming to light. And we have been finding scrolls around the earth that have been hidden, or that these people have resisted this control. And that's why I brought up the Ethiopian scrolls and texts, and them not allowing the change to happen, and keeping that information away from, and keeping those Europeans away from having the power over being able to control or change their ideology. And I'm going to try and get a hold of copies, or at least maybe videos that I can use at some point in the future to talk about the Ethiopian texts. So I'll be looking into that more, so that I could do that here and bring that information to you guys, so you can see how things were, because there is the current Hebrew Bible and Christian Bible has 88 books in it. The Ethiopian text has 166 books in it. So the books that they took out from during the First and Second Council of Nicaea are still existing in the Ethiopian texts. So I'm going to try and get a hold of portions of that, so that I can bring that stuff to you guys here. But we're going to trace the steps back. Like I said, we're going to go to the Emerald Tablets, and then from there, I'm not exactly sure. Tentatively, we'll do the Mary Magdalene scroll, and then hopefully by then I'll have access to some of the stuff and information from the Ethiopian text, and we'll cover some of those areas that I can cover with you guys to show you how much of things have changed in the time period, because it's important that people understand and understand, which is more importantly, understand what's going on this earth. That's what I'm about. That's what my book is about. The reality about reality, returning to the old ways, is about the knowledge that has been taken from you, and that it is here for us to find, and that we need to, those who have the mind to see, those who have the ears to hear, those who have the eyes to see, and the mind to know, to look for these things, because they're still here in existence on this earth. And we as a human species, we need to get back to the reality that, or back to the ways of spirituality before the control of religion, before the lockdown of the ideology. And those people, what were they teaching? They were teaching free thinking. All of them were attacked and killed for it. They were teaching you don't have to go to these orthodox boxes and pay tribute to be controlled by these people, that you're supposed to be learning and figuring this out on your own. Modern Christianity is moving back towards that by teaching you that the way of Christianity is learning and having a relationship with God, between yourself and God, or yourself and Jesus. They're getting back on the right path, but they're still not teaching you, what does it mean? What is the path that I should be on? They're teaching you to have a relationship, but they're getting there. So it's there, and it's still in their Bibles. It's still in their scrolls. If you just don't allow them to control you and read the scriptures, get a hold of a copy of the Bible, read that thing. They're going to try and stop you and stifle you from reading it. You don't need to read that. We'll tell you what you need to know. That's what they've been doing for thousands of years now. Okay. They've been telling people that, oh no, you'll interpret them wrong and you won't understand what's going on. I say, read it. And if you don't understand it, ask questions. And that's the whole purpose, right? So I tell people, don't believe anything that I've said. Go and look it up for yourself. Why do I say that? Because of a philosopher who was killed for his free thinking. Socrates said, I can't, and this was 4,500 years ago, I can't convince anyone of anything. The only thing I can hope to do is to get you to start thinking for yourself. Okay, let's continue here with this. And this is what I'm attempting to do. Let's start getting you to think for yourself. I'm showing you a knowledge from history that did not get eradicated, that these people, these controllers, the so-called powers that should not be, those people have been trying to control this knowledge and take it away from you for thousands of years now. And that knowledge is coming to light slowly and steadily coming, and it's there for you to see. All you have to do is look, and you will see it. It's there for you. It's been printed. People are talking about it. All you have to do is open your mind and listen. And if you don't believe it, you don't have to. It's free will. This is what we have here. Let's continue.
And thus, seated atop the summit of the highest heaven, God is everywhere and surveys everything all around. For there is a starless place beyond heaven, remote from all bodily objects. The one who dispenses life, whom we call Jupiter, occupies the place between heaven and earth. But Jupiter Plutonius rules over earth and sea, and it is he who nourishes mortal things that have soul and bear fruit. The powers of these gods invigorate crops, trees, and soil, but powers and effects of other gods will be distributed through all things that are. The gods who rule the earth will withdraw, and they will be stationed in a city founded at Egypt's farthest border toward the setting sun, where the whole race of mortals will hasten by land and sea. But tell me where these gods of yours are now, Trismegistus. Stationed in the great city on the Libyan mountain, and for the time being, let that be their story. We must talk now about the immortal and the mortal, for anticipation and fear of death torture the many who do not know the true account of it. Death results from the disintegration of a body worn out with work, after the time has passed when the body's members fit into a single mechanism with vital functions. The body dies, in fact, when it can no longer support a person's vital processes. This is death, then, the body's disintegration and the extinction of bodily consciousness. Worrying about it is pointless, but there is another problem worth worrying about, though people disregard it out of ignorance or disbelief. What is it that they ignore, Trismegistus, or whose possibility they question? Listen then, Asclepius. When soul withdraws from the body, it passes to the jurisdiction of the chief demon, who weighs and judges its merit. And if he finds it faithful and upright, he lets it stay in places suitable to it. But if he sees the soul smeared with the stains of wrongdoing and dirtied with vice, he sends it tumbling down from on high to the depths below.
Okay, so now this is talking about chakras once again. If you are living in the spiritual, you're living in the upper three chakras. If you're not, then you have the God that rules. The God that rules, all these gods that are ruling the earth that they're talking about are the chakras, the energy centers of the earth. You have to remember that in all of this, when they talked in the past, it was the gods of everything, including, what was it that I was just listening to? I can't remember what I was just listening to because I was reading so much in the last 3 days. One of them spent like 25 minutes talking about the God who created the shoulder and the God who created the left eye and the right ear and the right eye and the nose and the lips and the sinew and the elbow and the muscle tissue and the blood. They called them all gods. Everything was gods because it's a ruler. It's something that rules over. So here you see that they're talking about this. If you are in service to others, Let me put it into a different context, into a modern context. If you're in service to others, then you will be in this upper place, this more spiritual place. But if you're not, then the God that rules over that will have you tumble down. And by doing that, you're falling down, the fall of the Tower of Babel, that you're descending, you're falling to earth. That means that you are living in the flesh. You are falling away from spiritual and falling into the physical. So people have been talking about this. This is in all of the religions. That is the fall of man. And everyone's saying, oh, the original sin fell because of the original sin, because of the evil woman. That was the control mechanism that was warping that spiritual ideology of, if you're eating of the tree of life and then you fall, then because of Eve did that, so all women are evil, and they have menstrual cramps and childbirth pain because the original sin. That was all a corruption of the actual story of the fall of the human race. And the fall of the human race is that you're born into this physical, and that you have a choice of ascending, climbing Jacob's ladder, ascending back to the spiritual, or you don't and you fall, and then you live in the bottom three chakras. The bottom three chakras are the physical plane. If you learn about what the chakras are, and the Egyptians knew about it, the Greeks at this time called those energy centers a spindle wheel. This is what you heard in the Bibles of seeing the wheel within wheels, the wheels within wheels. That's the spindle wheel that the Egyptians and the Greeks specifically called it a spindle wheel. At the time of Hermes, that it was these energy centers in your body. They were aware of the energy centers, and that those energy centers ruled your characteristics in your body and in your personality. If you were self-serving, you would be ruled by the bottom three chakras, the bottom three spindle wheels, the bottom three energy centers of your body, which is physicality. 666, 3666, living in the flesh. Then there was the upper three chakras out of the seven that control us, and they would use them and name them gods. We'll get into that when I do the Emerald Tablets. You'll see that even as far back as Atlantis, they were called the gods that rule these, and then they had names. And so they literally, but figuratively or literally, the function of these gods, no matter the religion, no matter the place around the world, was to rule your characteristics and personality. That your choice, your free will, that is the standard in all religions, dating back to every scroll that has ever been found, that you have free will, and that there are seven energy centers that rule everything in the universe. And through free will, you will either reside in the lower three or the upper three, ruled by the heart, ruled by the center, ruled by the one, ruled by the 0 point. That is where the creation is in the universe. The creation, in Thoth said, the way to heaven is through the center. Okay, the center of the earth, the center of your beingness, the center is the heart chakra. Okay, so literally that was being foretold before that religion, Taoism, Buddhism, was ever invented, by thousands of years. So that's why I'm going to do the Emerald Tablets next. So here you see that there is a God that rules, and that you can't fool that God, and that if you are living in the flesh, you will fall, you will tumble down and be in that place living in the flesh. And you see this, and this is taking place before Jesus was alive in this text that we're reading here. Okay, let's continue.
And consigns it to the storms and whirlpools of air, fire, and water in their ceaseless clashing, its endless punishment to be swept back and forth between heaven and earth in the streams of matter.
Okay, so between heaven and earth, heaven being celestial, earth being physical. See, there's where you have the physicality and the spiritual. Heaven is the spiritual, physical is the earth. Okay, so air, fire, water, earth, air, fire, water is physicality. It's this plane, it's the bottom three chakras. Okay, let's continue.
Then the soul's bane is its own eternity, for an undying sentence oppresses it with eternal torment. To escape this snare, let us recognize what we must fear, dread, and avoid. After they have done wrong, the unbelievers will be forced to believe, not by words, but by example, not threats, but real suffering of punishment. Is it not human law only that punishes the wrongs that humans do, Trismegistus? In the first place, Asclepius, everything earthly is mortal, as are also those beings that live in a bodily state and fade from life in that same bodily state. They are all subject to penalties for the right or wrong they have done in life, and the penalty.
See, so again, this is in the physicality, in the penalties that you have in the physicality. So living in the flesh, right? All right, let me press play. I'll be right back.
These after death are more severe insofar as their wrongdoing may have been hidden during life. The divinity foreknows all of it, so one pays the penalty precisely in proportion to one's wrongdoing. Who deserve the greater penalties, Trismegistus? Those condemned by human laws who lose their lives violently so that they seem to have been penalized deservedly and not to have paid their debt to nature with a soul. On the other hand, the upright person's defense lies in reverence for God and supreme fidelity. God protects such people from all evils. For the Father and Master of all, who alone is all, shows himself freely to all, not where, as in a place, nor how, as through some quality, nor how much, as in a quantity, but by illuminating people with the understanding that comes only through mind. And when the shadows of error have been scattered from a person's soul, and he has perceived the light of truth, he couples himself with divine understanding in his whole consciousness.
Okay, so here you have that rule that, again, God being the spiritual, right? Let me put myself in full screen here. You have that God being the spiritual is protecting you. And I wanted to stop here because he used the term of error. Now, I don't know the exact timeline of this parallel, okay? But found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1948, there's another scroll that I will be doing and talking about eventually, and that is the Scroll of Truth, okay? The Book of Truth. In that scroll, error is talked about. Error in that scroll is talked about as a female entity that is way above the human condition in the spiritual context of things, who is next to the creator, just below the creator, who was also co-creating and was the reason for the corruption of the human condition, the reason for the split in the masculine and feminine, the reason for the living in the flesh as opposed to the spirit, was accredited to error creating this scenario, okay? That error did this, and that we're all living through this because the creator allowed error to then create this, because the creator is encouraging everyone to create new scenarios, to have new experiences. And that this one that we're currently living in was created by error. In that scroll, the creator of the universe is a single androgynous masculine feminine entity. Did Hermes have access to that scroll? And we don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Theologians don't know the answer to that. It is possible because Hermes lived in a time when that scroll may have been, excuse me, may have been available to him. But however, Hermes didn't elaborate a lot, but Hermes used that word error in the same context with the creation of this happening and a person having that choice, and that error was made. So the concept of our word error being the error of our ways comes from the Greek concept of that word. So it is possible, because that scroll existed and was found at the same time together. So the Essenes had both scrolls and died to hide those scrolls from the powers that should not be, and we didn't find them until 1948 in the Dead Sea area. So I don't know if anybody else has made that connection to find out about that. However, I made that connection and realized that error in the way that Hermes is talking about it here has odes to the possibility that Hermes may have had access to at least that scroll, because I haven't heard error except in maybe one other scroll besides this one, that error was used to refer to not just something that happened, but quite possibly a decision or a person, a reason for something other than the error of their ways, and they just made an error. In here, that was a little bit more told from the third person, like error was something, not just a mistake. Okay, let's continue.
And when his love of it has freed him from the part of nature that makes him mortal, he conceives confidence in immortality to come. This is what will separate the good from the wicked. When he has seen the light of reason as if with his eyes, every good person is enlightened by fidelity, reverence, wisdom, worship, and respect for God, and the confidence of his belief puts him as far from humanity as the sun outshines the stars.
See, so here you got to remember it's a metaphor, right? So the metaphor is that through wisdom, you will be as far from humanity as the sun is from the stars, because the wisdom will take you away from living in the flesh. Though as you move into the spiritual, the upper three chakras, as you move into that place in your mind, you become more spiritual. Your vibration ascends. Your vibration becomes more intense. Your physicality becomes less dense, and your spiritual practice becomes more dense. You start moving and evolving away from living in the flesh. Even though you're still living in this body, in this place, you start associating yourself not with this body and in this place. I am not the thinking mind. I am not the flesh pain body. I don't have an immortal soul. I am an immortal soul. Again, there goes back to the I am. When you start to realize the I am in yourself, you start realizing the creator in you. You start realizing the creator of the universe is you, that you are part of the creator of the universe, not a thing the creator created. Okay? That is the realization. As you start to ascend, you start to realize I am. That's why the Greeks said, I think, therefore I am. Because you start associating with I am, not I have, not there is, not that is, but I am. Not here, I am not the flesh. I am something that is immortal. I am. So when you learn that and start to associate yourself as I am something, I have value, I am value, I am not just in the flesh. They want you to believe you're nothing, you're separate, you're a little teeny individual, and then that they're in control and they own everything, and you're nothing but their subject. You're subject to me, the throne. I am your God. You are beneath me and nothing. So you don't see yourself as I am something. So as you stop living in the flesh and you start becoming spiritual, not religious, religion recruits you, spirituality waits for you to find it. As you become more spiritual, you will change the way you see the very texts that you're reading in all of these physical religions. And you'll start to see what is there that you weren't seeing before. And that you start seeing is the same thing that everyone starts seeing, because it is true, because it is enlightenment, and true enlightenment is true. Enlightenment is universal. So as you start to wake up, become less veiled, and pull back the veil of night, you start seeing clearly, like the song, I can see clearly now, the rain is gone, the veiling. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the clouds that crossed my, that closed my eyes, or I don't know exactly the words now. If I sang it, I'd probably remember it. Gone are the clouds now that blocked my sight. The veiling is going away. Thor, which means thunder. Mjolnir is warhammer. Mjolnir means lightning. He cracks the sky with his hammer of war. And what does that do? Lightning flashes and illuminates. And it chases Fenrir the wolf. What is Fenrir the wolf but the gray that is the haze, that is the clouds that are keeping us from seeing the light? So Odin cracks the sky, or the Thor cracks the sky with lightning, and the lightning illuminates the sky and chases off the clouds, the veil of night, and then you can see the light. Okay, so it's in everything around the world, and here you see Hermes talking about it again, that God rewards you with this knowledge, and this knowledge moves you out of the physical. And you then start associating yourself outside of the physical body as a immortal soul, that I am residing in this physical body, in this physical plane, but I am that I am. You start associating yourself with becoming something greater than yourself, and that you are a part of the creation, a part of the creator, not something that was created as an individual just living in this flesh, which is what they want you to believe that you are, and that this life is all you have, so you better live what you can. Oh, but we're in charge and you can't do anything except for what we tell you to do, so get a job and contribute, slave, because that's what they're telling you to do. So here you're seeing, even thousands of years ago, you're seeing that you're first of all being warned, but secondly being told of what it is in a way that, if you're paying attention, will lead you to the I am, lead you to the spiritual, lead you away from the prison that you're in the flesh. Let's continue.
In fact, the sun illuminates the other stars, not so much by the intensity of its light as by its divinity and holiness. The sun is indeed a second God, Asclepius. Believe it, governing all things and shedding light on all that are in the world, ensouled and soulless. For if the world was and is and will be a living thing that lives forever, nothing in the world is mortal. Since each part of it, as such in its actual state, lives forever and also lives in a world which is itself a single living thing that lives forever, there is no place in it for mortality. So if the world must always live, the world must be completely full of life and eternity. Just as the world is everlasting then, so the sun is ever the governor of things that have life and of all their power to live, dispensing and continuing it. Hence, God is the everlasting governor of things living in the world and of those that have life, and he dispenses this life eternally. He dispensed it all at once, however. Life is supplied by eternal law to all that have it in the way that I shall describe. Eternity's life-giving power stirs the world, and the place of the world is in living eternity itself. Since everlasting life hedges it about, and in a manner of speaking holds it together, the world will never stop moving nor be destroyed. The world itself dispenses life to everything in it, and it is the place of all things governed under the sun. The world's motion is a twofold activity. Eternity enlivens the world from without, and the world enlivens all within it, dispersing them all according to numbers and times fixed and appointed by the action of the sun and the movements of the stars. The whole chronological scheme framed in divine law. On earth, one tells time by the quality of the air and the change of hot seasons and cold. But in heaven, time runs by the return of the coursing stars to the same places in chronological cycles.
And that's kind of scary when you think about what he just said right there. That means that the Greeks had the idea and the concept of the collapsible universe, that the universe expands out and then collapses back on itself. So the Greeks understood that the universe was expanding and that the universe would eventually contract and collide in and collapse on itself. That being told right there in that statement. Yet, because that book is not something that anyone wants to reference, they're not going to tell you that in science, that Hermes literally, and that the Greeks 3,000 to 4,000 years ago knew the difference and understood that the universe itself was expanding and contracting. Because if they were going to tell you that knowledge and that the Greeks knew about that knowledge, they would have to tell you where they got that information from. And that means that they would have to give the reference to Hermes and this book. And then people would then be reading it and finding out the other information that was here. But that part right there, let me rewind that and we'll play that again. That part right there. Okay, let me replay that last 3 minutes and you'll hear him say that. Shows, let me go back into full screen over here, shows that the Greeks understood that the universe was an expanding universe that would contract and collapse on itself. Let's play it again, okay?
Have been scattered from a person's soul, and he has perceived the light of truth. He couples himself with divine understanding in his whole consciousness. And when his love of it has freed him from the part of nature that makes him mortal, he conceives confidence in immortality to come. This is what will separate the good from the wicked. When he has seen the light of reason as if with his eyes, every good person is enlightened by fidelity, reverence, wisdom, worship, and respect for God, and the confidence of his belief puts him as far from humanity as the sun outshines the stars. In fact, the sun illuminates the other stars, not so much by the intensity of its light as by its divinity and holiness. The sun is indeed a second God, Asclepius. Believe it, governing all things and shedding light on all that are in the world, ensouled and soulless. For if the world was and is and will be a living thing that lives forever, nothing in the world is mortal. Since each part of it, as such in its actual state, lives forever and also lives in a world which is itself a single living thing that lives forever, there is no place in it for mortality. So if the world must always live, the world must be completely full of life and eternity. Just as the world is everlasting then, so the sun is ever the governor of things that have life and of all their power to live, dispensing and continuing it. Hence, God is the everlasting governor of things living in the world and of those that have life, and he dispenses this life eternally. He dispensed it all at once, however. Life is supplied by eternal law to all that have it, in the way that I shall describe. Eternity's life-giving power stirs the world, and the place of the world is in living eternity itself.
Okay, so here we go. So pay attention to this part of what's being said here. This is shedding light on the ancient Greek ideology that we have now proven in a science, that they knew about this quite possibly 4,000, 5,000 years ago, and maybe further back than that.
Since everlasting life hedges it about, and in a manner of speaking holds it together, the world will never stop moving nor be destroyed. The world itself dispenses life to everything in it, and it is the place of all things governed under the sun. The world's motion is a twofold activity. Eternity enlivens the world from without, and the world enlivens all within it. dispersing them all according to numbers and times fixed and appointed by the action of the sun and the movements of the stars, the whole chronological scheme framed in divine law. On earth, one tells time by the quality of the air and the change of hot seasons and cold. But in heaven, time runs by the return of the coursing stars to the same places in chronological cycles.
See that? To the same places in chronological cycles, not just the seasons and the stars going back to where they were in the sky for humans. But if you were just living in the flesh, you could see that, okay, and say, well, that's just the season of the stars that's different from the seasons on the planet because the Earth is just rotating in the circle, and therefore the stars go back to. But that's not exactly what he's talking about and referring here. Okay, so they understood the concept of a collapsible universe, and no one's paying attention to that. Why? Because they can't reference this part. Because if they do, they have to reference the book, and to do that would suggest everything else in this book. If you're going to give light to and credence to, and say that this reference to the collapsible universe is sound, and that Hermes knows what he's talking about, because we've proven it, then that means everything else that was talked about in this book is also something that you might want to give credence to or give light to or give a thought to. And they can't have that. So they just got rid of all this information altogether.
The world is time's receptacle. The cycling and stirring of time invigorate it. Yet time works by orderly rule. Order and time cause the renewal of everything in the world through alternation. Nothing in this situation is stable, nothing fixed, nothing immobile among things that come to be in heaven and earth. The lone exception is God, and rightly He alone, for He is whole, full, and perfect in Himself, and by Himself, and about Himself. He is His own steadfast stability, and no external impulse can move Him from His place, since everything is in Him, and He alone in everything, unless one ventures to say that His motion is in eternity. But eternity, toward which all the stirring of time recedes, and from which all the stirring of time takes its rise, is itself immobile. Therefore God has always been stable, and eternity likewise has always stood still along with Him, holding within it a world that had not come to be, the one we correctly call sensible. This sensible world, which imitates eternity, was made in the image of that God. Though it always stirs, time in its own way still has the power and character of stability by the very necessity of recurring upon itself. Thus, although eternity is stable, immobile, and fixed, yet because the stirring of time which moves always comes back to eternity, and because the movement turns in a temporal pattern, it happens that eternity, which in itself does not move, seems to be stirred through the time in which it is, and it is in time that all the stirring goes on.
See, so in a temporal movement, right? So in a temporal movement, that would suggest cyclical nature. Again, so now we're looking at the golden mean ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, right? So now we're talking about a cyclical nature of the universe itself. So if the universe is moving in a cyclical nature, that means that they realized that it was cyclical, which means that it has a pattern, which means that it is a closed universe, not an open universe. That means that they were in the understanding of, mathematically, the torus. Okay, now the ideology of that math goes all the way back to what? We're going back to another Greek at the time. So the Greeks back then had a far greater ideology, far greater understanding of the universe itself. And as we're coming forward in time, science is proving that these guys knew what they were talking about, far greater than we did now. So what happened to the knowledge? Why is it that we lost that knowledge and we're just gaining it in the 21st century? Why is it that we're proving these things that these people, these Egyptians, these Greeks, these Romans from 3 to, from 2000 to 12,000 years ago, things that they knew that were just normal knowledge that everyone knew about, that we lost somewhere along the line, and we're just now regaining it. And when we're regaining it, people are saying, the Greeks talked about that, the Egyptians talked about that. And then people like me are going and finding that, and we're showing it to the world. All of the books that we're finding and all of the scrolls that we're finding this information in are scrolls that we're now finding that certain peoples at certain times were editing out of existence for people to know and learn about. Let me say that again. We're finding that as we are thinking, we are discovering things through science today in the 21st century, that the things that we are discovering and proving to be true, people in the past, in the Greek, Egyptian, Asian, Indian, even the Viking, Aboriginal in Australia, religions and spiritual practices and knowledge knew about thousands of years ago, maybe even tens of thousands of years ago. And that information was readily handed down from generation to generation until a specific time period in Earth's history when systematically the powers that should not be were destroying and seeking out to destroy all knowledge about certain events, certain things, certain knowledge, certain practices. And they were going around the planet and destroying and controlling and annexing all of this knowledge from existence to the population of this earth. A certain group of people at a certain time on this earth did all of those things and have been trying to do those things to the people of this earth ever since. And I talk about that in that book. Okay, so let's play the commercial for that book. For those of you who are around the world, you can listen to that, maybe take a look at that. I talk about that more than I'm talking about it now, but definitively I'm showing you that.
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide online now.
So this information has been around this planet from the beginning of time, and it's been told to everyone in every single culture around the earth in every single time until a time. And that time began and had a beginning. And from that time forward, during that time, that information was kept away from the earth. That time ended at a certain time, and that knowledge was available for people to look for and to find and to read. That knowledge is out there. It is there for you to see if you have the mind to know where to look, if you have the eyes to know where to look, if you have the ears to hear where to look. That information is in your hand. That information is in your head. The number of the beast that is in your right hand and in your forehead can play against you in a physical way or play for you in that spiritual way, because that knowledge is the cell phone, is the smartphone, is this computer that I'm broadcasting to you. It is the full absolute library of the entire planet. And they're still trying to corrupt that because they don't want you to know that which is out there. You have to sift through all the lies to find the truth. How do you do that? You ask questions. You look into things. You think for yourself and you find the knowledge. Because if you're in service to self, you're not going to care about that. All you're going to care about is power, money, fame, likes, clicks, and whatever that entails, so that you can be rich, living in the flesh, eating of the tree of life. If you are in service to others, you could just go through your life and just serve people as best as you can. If that's where you are in your development spiritually, that's okay. It doesn't matter. But if you are in that place where you're wondering and you're suspecting that this place isn't right and something's wrong, and that even the religions are not quite 100%, what's wrong with the religions? I'm not religious because I don't agree with everything that they're teaching. I agree with some of those things. That's okay. That's encouraged by all the people that all of those religions were based on. The message that was taught to you by the people that they based that religion on was not to go and sit in a box and have people control the knowledge that you gain. All of the people's message was to look for and find the true knowledge in nature, to look for this and to find this. It's there for you to look for and it's there for you to find. You just have to know where to look. And how do you figure out where to look? By looking. Because eventually, through trial and error, you're going to find a path that's going to be suitable for you. Don't listen to other people. Don't listen to me. Think that I'm telling you lies, and go and look for yourself and ask those questions. This is what I tell people all the time. Don't believe a word I've said. Look it up for yourself. Because when you go down that rabbit hole and you start asking questions, the moment you start asking questions is the beginning of the end of the mind control that anyone has over you. Anyone. If the governments are controlling you, if the rich and the elite are controlling you, if there are powers that should not be, if any of that is true, then by asking questions, you're going to find the answers. If all of that is not true, the only way you're going to find that out is by asking questions. So again, I'll quote Socrates, and I will say that there is nothing that I can convince you of. I could never hope to convince anybody of anything. The only thing that I can do is hope that I can get you to start thinking for yourself. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, and the moment you start questioning everything, is the breaking of the conditioning that is this place. Whether there are powers that should not be controlling it or not, this matrix you live in is designed to distract you. It is designed to have you live a life that is not your true life. You don't have an immortal soul. You are an immortal soul. You don't have a higher self. You are a higher self. You are not the thinking mind. You are not the ego, and you are not this physical pain body. You are, in fact, an energy being that is learning and experiencing. And that is what you're supposed to be doing. And every single learned person throughout all of history on this earth have been teaching you and saying those exact words to you throughout all of time. And the one thing that is consistent is the message of that. And the only other thing that is consistent is that there are humans on this planet that do not want you to know about that. And the people who do not want you to know about that are the ones who want you to believe they own this place and they're in charge. Ask the question, why would they need me to not? Why would they want me to not know about that? Because the only way that they can continue being in charge is if you believe they are. The only way that you can believe that they are in charge is that you have to believe that you're not. You have to believe that this is all that there is, and that when this body dies, you cease to exist. Otherwise, their power wanes, your power grows, and you realize that I am. Do you see? All right, guys, I'm going to stop there because it's about 5:45 on the west coast of the United States. So I'm going to stop there, and we will finish the Corpus Hermeticum next week. So be here next Friday if you're in the northern hemisphere of the planet, or next Saturday, depending on where it is in the world that you are tuning into the show, because it is Saturday for me over here in Australia. So this has been Orion Rising. I have been your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into the show. I love you guys. Those of you listening on the MP3 broadcast, I know you're out there. I pay attention to where you guys are listening to me around the world. You guys are listening to me in countries I didn't think would be listening to me. 70 countries around the world. I appreciate you guys. I know you're there. I love you guys. A shout out to you. It is for you that I am giving this information to the world. Okay. So I love you guys. I'll see you guys next week. Right. You guys have a great day. Have a great weekend. And we will finish the Corpus Hermeticum next week and move into the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. We'll either start that next week or we'll start it the week after. We'll see how far we get. We only have about 30 minutes. Let me see how much we have left here. We have about 30 minutes left, a little bit less than that, about 25 minutes left. So we'll see if we get through it all next week. And if we do, then we'll go straight into the Emerald Tablets. But I'll probably do that and then start it the next week. Yeah, I think we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. I love you guys. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys later. But think for yourself. Ask questions. Question everything. Don't believe a word I've said to you. Don't believe a word anybody says. Ask your own questions. Find your own path. That is the place of true enlightenment. That is what you're encouraged to do. That is what you're supposed to do. You have free will. You are free being from the creation of your immortal soul, and you will be a free and sovereign being until you return back to source, and then you'll be source along with everyone else. I love you guys. Have a great night.